Welcome to Gloves Off. This week, my special guest is Coventry Blaze head coach, Chuck Webber. Chuck, thanks for joining us.
I appreciate it. Excited to be here.
You didn't get a traditional way into coaching. You didn't play to any sort of standard that I know of. Tell us how you got into it, looking back to your time with the NHL, Buffalo Sabres.
Well, yeah, I mean, going back out of college, I went to a couple pro camps in San Diego, California. I tried to make it as like a skilled defenseman and unfortunately got released. And then I went to work in the front office for the Buffalo Sabres, selling tickets, ticket packages. A guy I played college hockey with went down to start a roller hockey team in Orlando, Florida, an old league back in the 90s called the RHI. And he took me down there to kind of sell ticket sales and marketing programs and corporate sales, and I did that and kind of jumped from that team over to the Orlando Solar Bears and the old IHL, which was kind of a AAA level of hockey in North America. During that time, I actually got kind of found by a scout and invited to another pro camp in Huntsville, Alabama. Went there, didn't work out, tried to be made a little more tougher, got into a few fights, and it didn't work out, and so I ended up, fortunately, got an offer to be the video coach with the Orlando Solar Bears back in 99-2000 season. And while I was doing that, I was also selling tickets for the Solar Bears and corporate packages. And I got some advice by our general manager, a guy by the name of John Weisbrod, who's the assistant GM for the Vancouver Canucks right now, who said, if you can excel at something you like, imagine what you can do with something you love. And I liked selling tickets. I didn't love it. Yeah. And I was the number one sales guy. I was a little, unfortunately, uber competitive anyways. So, I was the number one sales guy. And I knew I wanted to get into coaching, and I loved that. And so they gave me the opportunity to do that. The coaches loved what I did the first season as a video coach. And then they took me on as a full-time assistant coach and a video coach my second year. And we were fortunate enough to win the Turner Cup that year. And it started the progression.
And in Orlando, for those that don't know the IHL, there's some big guys there, players, ex-NHL guys. It was a good standard.
It was. It was a lot of guys that at the time that there was really big money in the IHL, comparable to, it was the NHL, and the IHL was even higher than the American League. A lot of veteran players. It was a high skill level of play, and it was great hockey to kind of be introduced to. A coach by the name of Peter Horacek kind of has been my mentor throughout my coaching career. Peter was the head coach of the Panthers for a bit last year, or 2 years ago, and this past season with the Toronto Maple Leafs after a long NHL assistant coaching career. And he kind of opened the door for me, and that started my progression in the coaching ranks.
And just rewinding a little bit, you said about selling tickets, and is that a fair reflection of your personality, in that anything you want to do it to the best of your ability?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be the best way. My parents kind of always, raised me that way. If you're going to do something, finish it and do it the right way. I know the fans hear me a lot say, do it the right way and process. And that's kind of how I've always been. There's a process to follow. You can't be afraid to kind of get your foot in the door somewhere. And that's the tickets allowed me to get in my foot in the door in those NHL or those pro hockey organizations. And then I was able to show that I knew the game. I was always a player growing up, maybe a little bit limited in my stick skills and my feet, but I always thought the game real well, and that enabled me to be a college hockey player and get a chance to play pro. Unfortunately, it didn't work out.
And so when you were selling your tickets, did you see that did you say, this is an opportunity for me to live the dream, to be a coach, be assistant coach?
You know what? I was just trying to get my foot in the door, selling tickets. I knew I always wanted to work in sports. I don't know what else I would do if I wasn't working in sports. It's something I've done since I was out of college. I interned for the Albany River Rats, which was an American Hockey League team. That was actually the first championship I was able to be part of. Unfortunately, I didn't get a ring because I was only an intern. But I do kind of, it was one of my 5 championships, you're kind of part of. And so starting for there and then working in the front office and just seeing how an organization is run and kind of getting to see all the behind the scenes stuff. You kind of learn and you take things, and I'm pretty meticulous in taking notes, things I like, I don't like. Even this past summer with the Coventry Blaze, I took a lot of ticket ideas that I had used and I gave it to Andy and to Sarah and to Rob, and seeing if it was something that would be potentially usable here in the Elite League.
And in your second season in Orlando, you won the Turner Cup?
We did. It was an unbelievable run. We were the second seed in the playoffs. We had a young team. We had 9 rookies on that team. Some great talented players that went on to had great NHL careers like Brian Pothier, Darcy Hordichuk, Ben Simon, JP Vijay. We had great veteran guys as well. One of our great rookies is a guy by the name of Dan Snyder, who unfortunately in the hockey world, most people know, that was tragically killed in the car accident with Danny Heatley. And that was a great loss to our family, that we were there. And we had great, like I said, other great veteran guys like Todd Richards and Jared Scaldi. And it was just, you could really see how the team kind of came together. And that was my first, in the trenches, the grind of a long playoffs, and it was a great run. And unfortunately, we're still defending Turner Cup champions because the league folded that year and ended up merging with the American Hockey League.
Okay. So, following your time in Orlando, you had a couple, 2 or 3 seasons with different clubs as assistant coach. But then you seemed to settle in Cincinnati in 2006. So by this time, you're a 33-year-old guy getting your first head coach gig.
Yeah, like you said, I bounced around a little bit as an assistant coach in Trenton, New Jersey, and then to Milwaukee in the American League with the Nashville Predators, and then I was down in Augusta, Georgia for 2 years with the Florida Panthers and New Jersey Devils organization, and then Salt Lake City for a year, and then Cincy, I was there for 4 years. It was a great run. We led pro hockey in wins over those 4 years. We kind of found our footing. It was when I really first started to recruit my own team and kind of build my own vision of what I felt, how a team should be built. And, I was fortunate to coach some very good players there and make a lot of good friends. And like you said, we won a lot of games. At the time, we held the record for consecutive victories. At one point, we had 17 straight wins. One year we...
Just stolen one of my questions.
Oh, yeah. So sorry about that. And getting to coach a lot of great players.
You mentioned the vision that when you went to Cincy, you had your own vision of your team. Does that differ now from what it was back in 2006, or do you still, as a coach, do you still have the same vision that you want to see on the ice?
Well, there's a little bit of an adjustment just because of the standpoint, when I was in Cincinnati, I was developing players for the Nashville Predators and the Montreal Canadiens. So they would send us each some prospects, and then I kind of had to build a team around those players, kind of needs that we had, so on and so forth. So it's a little bit different that way. But, you kind of have an idea of the type of player you'd like to work with, and more so the type of character. I've always been a big believer in character instead of characters. And, the biggest thing for us over that time we were so successful was because of the group of the people that we had.
You mentioned 17 games, which is something I was going to mention. That must be a fantastic feeling as a coach. 12, 13, 14.
It was. To win 17 in a row the way we did. And the thing I'm most proud of actually with that group, after we lost the one game, we came back and won 5 more in a row. So it was really, when you think about it, that was a great run of hockey. We were the favorites that year going into the playoffs as well. We should have been. That was a year that if we didn't win the championship, it would have been a letdown. But the guys found different ways throughout the playoffs, and it was a great playoff final series against Las Vegas. I think out of that final series, I think 4 or 5 players ended up in the National Hockey League between the two teams. And, we use that as kind of a springboard for the organization, which is still being successful today in North America.
And in Cincinnati, you also held the record for the most amount of playoff wins, 45.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
I didn't know that. But
over 4 years.
Yeah, we were fortunate to win it all in 2008, go to the conference finals and lose to South Carolina, which were the eventual champions. That was Godfrey's team in 2009. And then in 2010 to win the championship again I think we were the 5th seed that year. No one expected us to win that year. And, that was a group of hard-working guys that was similar to last year's Blaze team.
2 Kelly Cups, the John Brophy Award as well. It must have been a real special time for you in Cincinnati.
It was. Like I said, I worked with a lot of good people. Dean Stork, who was my assistant coach for those 4 years, has gone on. He's been the head coach for Greenville in the ECHL, and now he's coaching in the NCAA right now. And I had a great staff. A guy by the name of Chris Burke is my equipment manager, and Bob Case is my athletic trainer. John Hamill's my PR guy, and we were a really close unit of 5. And, it was all about winning. And, the players that we brought in all bought into that. And, it was a great honor to be the coach of the year in 2008 after being the runner-up in 2007. So, it was a situation from that standpoint, especially I always found in our business, if you've played up for a long time, you almost have to prove you can't coach. But in my situation, since I didn't have a long playing pro career, I had to prove always to everybody that I could coach. So it was one of those things that was really rewarding from that standpoint to be able to have that success.
And just touching on that point, did you find it difficult? There was a lot of people putting obstacles in your way throughout your career because you hadn't played at any standard.
Well, yeah, I think that you're always kind of fighting that a little bit, like who's this guy? And you know, I remember my first NHL camp in Nashville when I was in Milwaukee there. So I must have been about 28 years old, and I'm looking back and I'm putting drills on the dry erase board and everything else on the ice, helping run practice for Barry Trotz and the staff. And everyone's thinking like, who's this guy? Like, he didn't play in the NHL or whatever the case may be. So you just have to make sure you have a confidence in what you're doing. You have to be prepared. And I've always taken pride in that the teams I've coached have always been prepared for their opponents or what's upcoming.
And then following Cincinnati, you moved to Rochester.
Yes.
Which there was some sort of franchise change I'm not sure about, which you're going to tell us about.
Yeah, that was my first job in the American Hockey League, which is graduating to that next level, one step away from the NHL. Mike Santos got the assistant GM job with the Panthers, and another close who was with Nashville with me, and then Julien Brisebois ended up being the assistant GM for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So I was the finalist for both the Norfolk job with the Lightning organization and Rochester with Florida. I had to kind of make a decision. I'd gone through the interview process with Dale Talon, with Steve Yzerman, and I had 8 interviews for head coaching jobs that summer in the American League, and those were the 2 that I was kind of going back and forth on. Florida made the first offer to me. I had to make the decision which way I was going to go, and then I just made the decision to go to the Panthers organization, and we went to Rochester. We had a solid start to the season. Unfortunately, injuries and call-ups in Florida hurt, and we ended up a little under 500, didn't make the playoffs. My first year in San Antonio, we made the playoffs. We ended up upsetting Chicago in the first round. And then I had a couple more productive years. And it's nice to go because I still watch Panthers games, and to see probably half that team right now is guys I coached in the American League.
Yeah.
So to see guys and see kids that were 20-year-old players just trying to find their way in pro hockey, now being successful NHL players, is very rewarding.
Do you follow your ex-players closely?
I try to. It's pretty busy, coaching by yourself here. But usually when I get my workouts in, I try to put on like NHL on the fly or something like that on my iPad and try to watch highlights and stuff like that. And when we're traveling, go through stats and see who's where. And because sometimes you don't realize, one of my former players, Tyson Strachan, got signed by the Minnesota Wild. I was like, wait a minute, he was just in Buffalo. What happened? And there's little things like that. Just you try to stay up with the guys, and in the summer you try to stay in touch. And and that was even part of recruiting this year, was kind of retouching with getting in touch with a lot of those guys, in the long run.
I've got visions of you sitting in your living room watching NHL on the fly, saying to the wife, he used to play for me. He was one of mine. Is that how it works?
Yeah, it kind of is. It kind of is that way. Well, fortunately, she knows most of them as well. Like it's a situation where she's like, I remember him as a 20-year-old, couldn't figure out his way, or whatever the situation may be. And so it's rewarding from that standpoint. I've kind of gone from an age standpoint being a big brother. Now that I'm in my 40s, it's maybe a little bit more of a fatherly figure kind of as the head coach. But kind of starting out in my career when you're in your early 30s, you're kind of more that big brother and, trying to give life lessons as well as hockey lessons.
And in San Antonio, towards the end, there was a switch. You went from head coach to director of hockey operations, is that right?
Associate head coach and director of hockey operations, yeah. That year there were some rumblings that they might be looking to make a coaching change and stuff at the NHL level, and Dale was very honest with me from the standpoint he didn't think I was ready yet to be an NHL head coach, and he wanted to get somebody in the organization who potentially had the ability to do that. And being the fact that it was my mentor, Pete Horacek, coming back after leaving Nashville, it was kind of a no-brainer from my standpoint to do that. And I was already doing a lot of player work as well, as far as recruiting and putting together lists of trying guys that would sign to American League deals or potential guys that weren't drafted that we'd still try to bring in. So they added on a little more responsibility to me that way while still keeping my coaching duties.
And looking back, were they 3 happy years in San Antonio?
You know what? I met a lot of good people. Unfortunately, we didn't win as many games. There's always different reasons. From that standpoint, we were pretty young when I was there, against some pretty older veteran teams in our division, in Oklahoma City and Austin and some of those. But that was my job, was to make the younger kids better, and to get them to the National Hockey League. It wasn't as much winning games or making the playoffs there. American League is more about developing the kids for the National Hockey League.
And from there, you took the strange step to move to Zagreb.
Yeah, well,
KHL. Tell us about that. How did that come about?
Well, it was a weird situation. It was unfortunately the assistant GM in Florida got let go in February. And basically at that point, I kind of knew the writing was on the wall a little bit, that the organization was going to make a change. Dale contacted me, my contract was up, and made the decision that they were going to go in a different direction, which happens.
Yeah.
And so that summer I was looking, had some different job interviews. I didn't want to go back to the ECHL that year because I figured I had accomplished everything that I had in that league. So I was looking at some major junior jobs. I had a couple interviews there as well as American League. And then in July, I got a call from Medveshek asking if I'd be interested in coming to the KHL. My agent at the time, or still my agent, had the previous coach who, due to family reasons, was coming back to North America. And I thought, it's a chance to work in the second best league in the world. It's a new experience, and so why not? And kind of jumped all hands and feet in and moved to Croatia.
And the feedback I've had from people that have been involved in the KHL, I've spoken to a couple of players that have played there. Is it a little bit chaotic, a little bit strange going on there? I don't want to go too much into what I've heard.
It's a different environment for certain. I think that my last year, I want to say of 27 or 28 teams, I think 12 coaches got fired. I think that year I was let go October 4th. And 1 month into the season, I was like the 7th coach fired, like after a month. You look at this, even this year in the KHL, I think there's already been 14 coaches let go. It's like Mike Keenan got fired this year after winning championships in Meadowlark, Magnitogorsk. It's an interesting league. From the standpoint of the playing all over Russia, Finland, Slovakia, Croatia, the travel and everything, and the level of hockey is fantastic. For me, it was a big eye opener how many good players are still out there that just made the decision not to come to the NHL. There was guys, I was talking to Mike Keenan, and I was like, why isn't he coming in the NHL? He's like, he makes $25 million over 5 years tax-free, or he makes $700,000 plus taxes taken out in North America. What do you think he's going to do? And he doesn't have to learn English. So it's like, okay, it makes sense. And there's a lot of great players in that league.
I'll use the word fired.
Yeah, that's what it was.
You got fired after 13 games. Which of the chances and you won 4?
Yeah, we started 1-6. Against if you look those 6 losses, 5 of the 6 were the top 4 teams in the league: Red Army, SKA, Magnitogorsk. The list goes on and on there. And then we were 3-3 in our last 6. We were kind of making steps in the right direction. A little bit of a slow start. We beat Dynamo Riga on a Friday night. And 3-2 at home, scored a power play goal, outshot them. Like, all right, here we go. We're going in the right direction. I got an email at 11:30 that night on my way home that I was fired. And I was like, okay, so drove back to the rink, and I was like, what's going on? And you know what? They had made their decision already, and it's the nature of the business. I've been told that you can almost plan on getting fired once for every 8 years you coach. And at that point, I'd gone 15 years and not really been fired in season yet. And it happens. And, I'm not the first coach to be fired, and I won't be the last. And it's the nature of the business.
So then your phone rings, and I think I'm right in saying Paul Thompson was on the other end of the phone.
Yes. Yeah, Tomo was the first one who contacted me from the Blaze.
And how big a decision was it to come to Coventry?
It was pretty big at the time. I was, my family and I were prepared to kind of ride out the year a little bit and see what would pop up in North America. So this was November now, so we just got back to North America. I was prepared to spend Christmas back in North America and kind of see what happened. Tomo called, and we started talking a little bit, and then Peasy called. We kind of started talking numbers and stuff like that. And originally, it was thanks but no thanks. I started doing some research on the team, watched some games. And then we kind of kept going back and forth, and eventually we got to the end of November, and I was like, you know what? I think we can make something productive. I'm a coach. This is what I do. Like I don't sit home and do nothing very well.
So they wore you down eventually.
Yes, they did. And so we made the decision. Came over December 14th. I landed at 7 a.m. in Birmingham. Hopped on the bus to Edinburgh. First game in Edinburgh, lost Ashley in the first period, lost Frischman in the first period, and before I knew it, I think we had 9 skaters. And I was like, what is going on right now? And then we came back, we lost to Sheffield on Sunday 4-2. And then I finally got my first sleep a little bit, and it kind of got rolling from there. It was exciting, and it was a new experience. I'm always up for new challenges.
And what were your first impressions of the Blaze as a club?
On ice, a little chaotic. I thought that they had a very good front office. I thought they had people that wanted to improve the organization. They wanted to improve the league. They had a vision for how they wanted things to get done. And the biggest thing when I came over, I said, you have to let me do it my way. I said, this is how it has to be. I said, there's going to be some unpopular decisions to be made that I feel if you're willing to buy in and do this way, it's going to work. It might not be immediate, but you have to be patient. And Andy and Peasy and Mike and Tom were like, here you go. Clean slate, whatever you want to do. And they gave me that opportunity, and I appreciated them to do that. And, fortunately, it took a little time, as everyone knows, to get the buy-in and to get things kind of going in the right direction. And when we were able to finally do that.
And when you first came in, were there many frustrations in not so much the standard of the hockey, but the facilities you encountered, the waiting for half an hour for a memory stick after the game, the small office in the Sky Dome?
Well, it's not even, I realized my office was, I think, a toilet or something like that at one time. But a little bit, like, to be honest with you, last year you couldn't get a copy of the game right after the game in a visitor's building. So I would have a 6-hour bus ride and just not be able to work. And for me, I want to put the game in right after the game and edit it on my computer and have the boys prepared for the next day. It's just how I work. And I think fortunately this year now we have that. And maybe it was a little bit of me kind of complaining to Peasy and to Andy and Mike and them going to the league and, kind of being able to do that. And it was different. Like I walked into Edinburgh, and the players tell the story to the day that I asked, so where's the coach's office? They're like, there is no coach's office. And there was a closet I was actually able to change in. And it was definitely a different environment, different arenas. I was used to 18,000 seat arenas with amenities and everything else. And it's definitely a different quality of hockey than the KHL. You just have to maximize I've always used the term maximize your group's potential. So I had to adjust some things along the way. But you know what? I wasn't willing to adjust my belief system. The work ethic I think you have to have. I think the off-ice conditioning and the video work and the preparation work.
How did you find the officials when you first came in? I'm not asking you to.
Can I get fined for this or not?
I'm not asking you to make disparaging remarks about them, but was there a difference?
There's definitely a quality. You can see, unfortunately, there's a little bit of lack of training and a lack of guidance, to some of them, which I think unfortunately makes it inconsistent. I've always said I can live with an official whether he calls everything or calls nothing, as long as he's consistent or he's willing to communicate. Because I'll never swear, and it's never personal with a referee. If I'm arguing with a linesman or a referee, I'm arguing the call, not the person. And there was definitely some frustrations for me last year because I'd always worked with a certain level. But at the same time, I think this past summer they did a 2 or 3 week officiating course. So hopefully maybe these are all steps in the right direction for the league moving forward.
And then the decisions come back this season. I know it was quite a lengthy decision for you to make. It was never going to be a snap decision. You always said, even at the time of the playoffs, my agent knows not to call me in the playoffs. I remember that remark. Were there other offers on the table? There
were some other offers. A couple things to stay in North America. Unfortunately, I didn't think they were the right fit for me. There was a couple other countries that had interest as well to do some things there. But fortunately, last year, that nobody realized that right before the Nottingham series, my wife and I found out we were expecting our first. And so we made the decision that if we weren't going to be back in North America, we wanted to be in an English-speaking environment. recruitment. Like I felt there was a level of comfortability I had with Andy and Mike and James and just the Blaze organization. I respected how they went about their business and the care that they put into their product. So we went back and forth on some things, and we were able to get it worked out. And there's a couple people even after I agreed to come back to Coventry that were like, hey, this is available. And I said once I'd made the decision to come back to Coventry, I was going to honor that decision.
I always remember looking back and people would be talking in bars and before games, will Chuck stay? And one of the things I always said, and we've just touched on it, is that you look back at your resume, you don't go 1 year one place, 1 year another place. Cincinnati was
4 years.
4 years. San Antonio, we've just said, was 3 years.
Yeah.
So I guess you're a stayer.
You know what? I prefer the way I've always looked at it as wherever I go, I want to leave a legacy of success. In Cincinnati, you look even today, now we're, 6 years away from Cincinnati. I think they've made the playoffs 5 out of 6 years. They've gone to the conference finals. They've lost in the finals. Last year, San Antonio lost in the first round of the playoffs. The Panthers were an improved organization in the NHL. I think they were only like 4 points out of the playoffs last year. So that's always been a goal of mine of wherever I've been, is to kind of leave a legacy of, hey, this works, and, being able to pass on some knowledge and being able to allow that for an organization to keep moving forward.
Okay. So to move on, I'd like to talk about recruitment.
Yep.
Obviously, you've just done your first recruitment. When you were back in the East Coast or the IHL, did you do the recruitment there?
I did. Yeah, it was a big thing for me. Not in the IHL, but in the ECHL, mainly in Cincinnati. That was a big part of my role. But again, it was kind of filling in pieces around the NHL team. And it is always nice at that level because you have access to the NHL scouting material. So I could call the head scout for the Panthers, or at the time the Canadians, or Nashville, and say, hey, I think I'm about signing this guy. And they could give me about 4 different scouts' opinions on him. So it was definitely nice from that standpoint to have that, lengthy group of information. So it was definitely getting used to recruiting again this past summer. Because I hadn't recruited in 5 years, basically, from my time in the American League. You really don't recruit. So there's definitely some getting used to it again and kind of remembering, kind of the process that goes along with it.
Is it a misconception that you can look back at your time in the East Coast and the better players you've coached and just sort of cherry pick them, if you like, to say, oh, come to Coventry? It's not that easy, is it? I
wish it was. Unfortunately, with a lot of the players that I've coached now, they're making really good money in the American League or the National Hockey League, or they're in the KHL, they're in Austria, they're in the DEL, they're in Sweden, they're in Finland. I mean, they're in the upper echelon leagues, unfortunately, in Europe. You kind of try to sell them on the education package, the English-speaking environment. Some things like that. And there's some guys that are like, yeah, give me another year or two, kind of thing. Let me finish. Or to be honest with you, those guys have a short lifespan to try to make as much money as possible. So they're going to try to make as much money as possible, and then they're maybe looking for the experience or potentially getting their master's degree, things like that. So, I had one of my former players, signed a 6-figure deal with the Toronto Marlies that I thought he was coming here, and then he just said, you know what, the Toronto Marlies offered me 6 figures to go play in the American League. I was like, take it. You can get your master's at another time. That was a hard part, is unfortunately that a lot of the guys that I had coached had been playing at higher levels.
You touched earlier when you said about you first came in, it was a little bit chaotic. I think we lost 9 in 10. Mm-hmm. It took a while for the players to get used to Chuck Webber's style, systems. So that was probably a surprise come the end of the season when the team sort of broke up. The likes of Craig Seska and Mark Smith were let go and we replaced them. From a recruitment point of view, was that a big decision to make? Was it a case of looking to improve on those guys, or?
From a people standpoint, it was a hard decision. We knew O'Mara was retiring. We knew, Egner was retiring. So we knew those two for sure. We knew Stewart had been signed. We agreed with Jorgensen to come back. And then it was kind of, we made the decision, we thought the league was going to be upping its level. And while we thought they were great guys, we felt we had to upgrade our skill level. Talking with Peasy during the season, we kind of looked, we struggled to score goals. We were the second lowest scoring team in the league last year. And we knew you can't rely on your goaltending and your defense all the time. We felt that we got pushed around a little bit by Cardiff. We knew we play Cardiff a bazillion times. We play in their building, we play in our building, smaller buildings. So we knew we wanted to get a little grittier. Last year, unfortunately, Craig had to do all our fighting. We really had nobody else. At one time I talked to him and he's like, I have fought 9 different guys on Cardiff. Like, it was almost to the point he was joking with the standpoint, who now? Like, because they were saying, hey, it's my turn, kind of, because we had nobody else. And so we had some things we wanted to identify. We knew moving forward, we knew we wanted to upgrade our skill level, and we knew we wanted to have good people. And that was a big thing, part of our recruiting.
You mentioned O'Mara retiring, Gertson deciding to retire, Eggy as well. Was there an opportunity to bring in like a marquee signing, like a Bradley or an O'Mara, somebody like that?
Unfortunately, no. Gortson was such a late. We actually had him in our lineup all the way, I think, until the end of July. Yeah. So probably only 4 weeks before the start of training camp, we're like, geez, we have to replace a huge person, and what we were planning on, kind of from a leadership standpoint, setting the tone, playing the right way. I mean, Gortson was the coach of basically the team last year. Yeah. Before I got here. So that one was tough. That of the ones we planned on O'Mara and Egner, but the other ones were tough. We talked to some players, but unfortunately most of those guys kind of priced themselves out of our price range.
Looking back at Gertson, do you wish you'd maybe put more pressure on him to stay? Would he have stayed with more pressure, perhaps? Or is that not your style or Peasy's style?
No, he came to us and said, I'm retiring. He was like, listen, I have 3 kids now, a dog. Watching his family try to get through the airport, I guess, was a scene. He just made the decision. It was too much. He had a great job opportunity. We would have loved to have him come back. We were working on some things outside of hockey for him as well. We were getting creative. And that's one thing I love about working with Andy and Mike and Peasy, is they're willing to get creative to help the players, and so we were trying to come up with some things that way, and unfortunately it fell through late, and we had a huge hole to fill.
So any perception that we let him sort of slip through the net or retire a year early wouldn't be true?
No, I think if anyone was to ask Steve, he had a great opportunity to start a hockey business at home and not have to pack up his family again and move across the Atlantic, and I think that got to be a little too much for him and for Sam, and they were great. Like Sam and my wife became good friends, and they still stay in touch, especially with all the baby stuff and having a child in the UK now. And like I said, Gortzy's definitely a guy we've missed to start this season.
Absolutely. Moving on from recruitment.
Yep.
A little bit about Tihi. I spent a lot of time with you. I saw a different side to you from the guy who sits up in the crowd watching you. Quite an intense personality, pacing around and making notes. It was an incredible experience, and probably, I think personally, one that only the people that were there, especially with the Tihi game, would understand.
Yeah, for sure.
How did that game, for those 250 people watching, how did that game compare to the games in North America?
I mean, the intensity of the game, to win a hockey game, you have to be emotionally and structurally engaged in the game. And I think, you could tell from the beginning of that day, all the guys were focused and prepared. We actually put in probably 4 major system changes just for Tihi. I watched both of their games very closely. While against weaker competition, they had some tendencies, and we use the term disruption a lot, and we disrupted them. Yeah. From watching them on video in the Polish league to their first 2 Continental Cup games to our game, we had them on their heels. We had some chances that, instead of, we scored the second goal to begin the third, but we had some chances. We could have been up 2 or 3-0 first period, second period. There was an intensity. There was basically every whistle a scrum. There was a lot of pushback by both teams, and there was just a lot of fight in that game. And at times where maybe we were a little too emotional, Probably. We especially with Teehee having as deep a bench as they did compared to ours, we spent a lot of energy emotionally. And, unfortunately, we made some mistakes that they capitalized in the third period.
As a coach, the incident with Boris before the game, or as the game was about to start, is that a frustration for you when he gets a 10-minute misconduct for sticking up for his boys, basically? Is that frustrating? Or is
it's incredibly frustrating, especially because the rule in international hockey is you're not allowed to cross the red line. And they had 8 of their players on our side of the red line.
But could we have handled that better? Or could the boys on the ice?
Well, I guess, Boris, if you look back and watch the video, Boris didn't punch anybody.
No.
One of their players punched our guys. There was a scrum. Boris is the tallest guy in the scrum, and they picked him out. I mean, if you look at it, it was unfortunate. Boris with it getting 10 minutes. Kevin Noble got 12 minutes. Quinnell got 12 minutes. So we lost. And then Godfrey just came off an injury who hadn't really played much. I mean, he only played 3 shifts against Belgrade. Yep. And Jorgensen had to play a ton of hockey. And we had Drew Fisher as a forward playing D. With Chalmers. So, those guys had to play a lot of minutes, and I think that ended up wearing on us as the game went on, unfortunately.
Moving away from City, the Elite League playoffs. I can't talk to you without mentioning that. Fantastic weekend.
Yes.
Something that back in February, January, we probably could happen. Briefly tell us your memories of that weekend.
Well, I think the biggest thing, leading into the, starting with Nottingham, I thought it was a great, result going 3-3 out of their building, which I think really kind of changed the momentum. I think they thought, they were going to come back to our building with a big lead, and I think we were able to get them on their heels a little bit. And then the Belfast game, I just remember us battling, and I remembered how important video replay was. We probably don't win that game without video replay against Belfast. The DaCosta goal was clearly in the net. Everyone saw it but the guys on the ice. And they went back to the video, goal. And, there were some momentum, changes we were able to handle that way. I thought, we got some great performances out of guys. I thought Tendler was fantastic that weekend. I know Jeremy had a tough season last year. And but that weekend, you needed 120 minutes out of a guy, and he was fantastic. I know, like, Kale Tanaka didn't play the first game against Belfast and was fantastic against Sheffield. Having that depth that, between the sponsors and our ownership group to come up with the extra funds to carry a couple extra imports was huge. And just the emotion of the weekend, the fan support. I just remember after the game against Belfast, the guys being exhausted, going to a shootout, and getting supplied. I think they gave us 8 pizzas. And I called Mike and I was like, listen, this is what they gave us as a post-game meal. He's like, I'm on it. Went out, got chicken pasta, got all this food for the boys, bottled water, rushed it to the hotel so the guys could get refueled. And you could just see it. It was just the whole organization, the fan base, everyone bought in. And it was just such a family atmosphere. That whole weekend, it was like one big family throughout. And, and for us to get off to the 4-0 lead against Sheffield, I think everyone was like, who are these guys? But you could just see we were playing at a faster pace. And I think that was a credit to the guys, all the work they put in their conditioning.
There's a school of thought, and no disrespect to any of the other players that were involved that weekend, Coventry Blaze players, the likes of O'Mara, Gertz and Egner, retiring, going into that weekend thinking, this is my last weekend of pro hockey. Do you think that pulled us through at some stage? I
think it was a huge help there. If you could get a player to consistently buy into the mindset to play the game like it's your last game you'll ever play, you'll never have to worry about work ethic, because everyone would handle it that way. And it's unfortunate, it's human nature, but those guys were a catalyst for us. They played a lot of minutes. The video of Egner blocking every shot that came near him, winning every battle. There was just the guys, if the fans saw the bruises and the injuries and the cuts and the scrapes that these guys were playing with, there was a hard-fought 125 minutes. They came back, couple fluky goals there with Sheffield to make it 4-2. And I remember going to the boys on the bench, hey, it wouldn't be our way if we did it easy. If we were to skate through this game 4-0, it wouldn't have been our way. But to go 4-2 and to have to battle to the very end, it was fitting for us. Think back to when Ross Venus was about to break up the ice when Mark Thomas fell over. What goes through your head when that's happening? As a fan, I'm thinking, skate,
shoot, is it the same thing for you?
Pretty much, it's like give yourself a chance. You know, the biggest thing is give yourself a chance to get the shot off. And basically, I'm actually looking behind the play. Like, I'm not worried about V so much because I know pretty much what he's going to do. It's like, okay, if he misses, what could happen? You know, do we need to get guys on a line change? You know, potentially if we're caught tired in our zone, I'm yelling to the D to change and not get caught. Oh, is he going to score? So there's some other things you're kind of managing away from the puck in those situations.
And probably the best bit of the weekend, I guess, was coming back to the Sky Dome and the guys coming on the ice with JD announcing you all, fans chanting one more year to you. Very emotional times for everybody.
It was. You know, one of my favorite pictures is Eggy on the bus, you know, climbing through the top there. And
bus driver wasn't very happy about that.
Probably not. There's probably a safety reason, something. But you know what? But again, being able to share it with the fans in Crosby's afterwards, and then continuing the party till the wee hours of the morning. I know I was hurting you. The fans don't realize at 8:30 the next morning, I think I got home, it was like 4:30. And I was up. I walked into the rink that morning, and I had to do exit interviews because all the guys were leaving. So I had anywhere from 10 minutes to 20-minute one-on-one meetings. And to a man, we were all hungover, but we battled through. And you know what? We got to relive. We talked about their futures, the past a little bit, and it was just a finish to a very professional performance by the boys in the playoffs.
And having moments like what we had at the Elite League playoffs gives you the focus maybe to push again. We're not in a great place at the moment.
Nope.
Bottom of the league, we've just been knocked out of the Challenge Cup. What's the vision for Chuck and for the Coventry Blaze moving forward, for this season at least?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to be focused on the games ahead of us, the next game up. You can't get too much caught in the big picture that way. You know, you can't be like, oh, geez, everyone says we're bottom on the table. Well, we have a 500 record. If we were at a 500 record with, 13 games instead of 9, I think that puts us 5th in the table.
But we're not where you want us to be at the moment.
No. I would say, I think we're going in the right direction. Our first 8 games, we scored 11 goals. I'm just talking Elite League. The 8 games since then, I think we've scored 24, 27. So we've doubled our production. I think in 5 of our last 7 games, we've given up 3 goals or less. 6 of our last 8, we've scored 4 goals or more. We scored a power play goal, I think, in 10 of our last 12 games, or 8 of our last 10. And if you include Teehee, I think we're 11 for 13. So the power play is going in the right direction. We need to clean up our penalty kill a little bit. What I'm finding right now with us, it's our work ethic has been better. I mean, take out the Manchester game we put up. There's different words you could use for it that you can't say on video. Everyone knows that. Every player knows. There was no one player that I can say or he can say I was going that day. It was the perfect storm of poor hockey. All of us, from myself on down. I take responsibility for every loss, from standpoint. I look back from a preparation standpoint or a line management or a special teams management. And the boys have a level of accountability to each other, and I have a level of accountability to myself and to the owners as well. And we all know that we picked the worst game to let the organization down and let our fans down in Manchester. Like, if we would have had the same performance against Cardiff with the same level of energy on Saturday, I would have liked our chances.
Would it be unfair to say there was an element of complacency with the Manchester game, or is that unfair?
No, I think it was just a complete lack of execution. We were sloppy. I mean, Manchester had many open nets. Like, I won't sugarcoat it and say, oh, we only lost, 2-1 with a empty net or 3-1. What it was, they gave up a lot of chances against. We didn't capitalize on chances. We were sloppy. The boys knew that on Tuesday. When we came back on Tuesday and we practiced and we watched the video, I mean, they knew. Their eyes are wide open. They knew they weren't good. You could look in the locker room afterwards. There's a lot of heads and hands afterwards in the locker room after that performance. And the guys knew they let an opportunity pass by. But at the same time, I had to let the guys know, if you look at the bigger picture of late, it's going in the right direction. direction. We started, we were unfortunately, we only got 2 wins in our first 8. We only had 4 points. We've had, 7 or 8 points now in our last group of games. And it's sitting there. We have games in hand. You look, our offensive production's gone up. I think what we're having right now is we're getting more consistent effort. We're just getting a little lack of we're getting inconsistent mistakes. Different guys are making different mistakes on different nights. And that's hurt us a little bit. When you look at the 10-8 game against Belfast, maybe that's a night Stewie would want a few back. You look at maybe a 6-4 game against Cardiff, there's a defenseman that would want 2 plays back. You look at maybe a game against Nottingham, there's a different defenseman that would want to play back, or a forward. And that's part of getting everyone together.
And that's very similar to when you first came over and we lost 9 in 10. It's a case of everybody getting together and believing in your systems and getting on the same page as Chuck Webber.
Well, yeah, and I think you could ask any of the guys, they're getting more comfortable within their identities on the team. They're getting more comfortable with seeing their mistakes. Some of the guys had never been told they've made a mistake in the last few years. They've just been allowed to play the game. Okay. And now guys are being held to a different level of accountability. And now guys are understanding that the guys aren't handcuffed. They can make plays. What I always say is make the right play. Because I always say if you communicate, you manage the puck, and you make the right play, you should never lose a game. And we're still learning to do that. Different mistakes, turnovers. The fans see when a guy turns over a puck, it leads to a goal, or a guy makes, doesn't pick up his man or doesn't take away. And those mistakes happen. And guys, everyone's going to make them. It's just how you manage them and you try to eliminate them.
And moving forward, it's about building a run. I keep saying that.
Yes.
Building a run, building momentum, and pushing and going into Christmas, trying to get a run of wins together.
It is. Right now we have 2 things we're left playing for. You have a league championship and the playoff championship. And, we're not that far. We don't feel we're that far off from a league standpoint. If we can get some health, we've been battling that a little bit as well. I mean, you look at the Manchester game, to be missing guys like Boris and Russ and Kevin right off the get-go. You add those 3 plus a couple guys that were sick and hurt. It hurt. Manchester had the same thing, though. That's why the first message I had to the boys before the game on Sunday was no excuses. And, it just didn't work out for us that way, unfortunately. But yeah, it's getting a good run. You're going to lose some games, but lose games because the other team's just better than you. Not that you've given them opportunities. And if we can cut down on those free opportunities or free chances we're giving, we're going to win more games than we lose.
Chuck, thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed Gloves Off, and we look forward to seeing you next time.